This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can find all the cards in this video in their store by using the links in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance and Magic's highest level of competition. Today we're going to take a look at the Amass mechanic. Amass made its debut in 2019's War of the Spark, and it was meant to represent Bolas building his zombie army for the war. It always comes with a numerical value, and when you amass, you put 3 +1/+1 counters on an army you control, and if you don't control one already, you make a 0/0 token and put those counters on it. So Relentless Advance either gives you a 3/3 zombie army, or puts 3 +1/+1 counters on your zombie army. A variant of the mechanic also appeared in Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth, where the zombie token was turned into an orc token, this time to represent Sauron and Saruman building their orc army. To be eligible for this list, a card had to have the Amass keyword. In all, there are 56 Amass cards in Magic, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like regional championships. Alright, let's take a look at the top 10 cards with Amass. At number 10, it's Dreadhorde Invasion. For 1 generic and a black, this enchantment amasses 1 during your upkeep and you lose 1 life. And whenever you attack with a zombie with power 6 or greater, it gains lifelink until end of turn. This card's a good example of what can make Amass interesting. It can almost be a modal effect. You have the option of growing an army and making it larger and maybe eventually giving it lifelink, but you can also find a way to get a 1/1 every turn if you're sacrificing the token to your outlets. It gained all of its points in Standard in 2019. In mono-black sacrifice decks, it could really take advantage of the army token. These decks used Priest of the Forgotten God, Rankle, and Ayara, all of which get much better when you have an extra body lying around. It's been a long time since it's gained any points though, and it seems likely we'll see Amass return at some point in the future, and Dreadhorde Invasion is likely to get bumped from the list when that happens. At number 9, it's Angrath, Captain of Chaos. For 2 generic and 2 black-red hybrid mana, he's a 5 loyalty planeswalker. He has a static ability that gives your creatures menace, and a -2 loyalty ability that amasses 2. So Angrath can come down and improve your attacks while also adding a body to the board, or buffing an army you already have. It saw play in the Standard of 2019 and 2020, where it appeared in some Rakdos aggro decks, especially those that use Labyrinth Raptor, a card that pays you off for having Menace, so Angrath's static ability is particularly good. Angrath hasn't gained any points in a long time though, and that's not going to change anytime soon. At number 8, it's Lazotep Plating. This instant costs 1 generic and a blue and it amasses 1, and you and your permanents gain hexproof until end of turn. This kind of card can be kind of narrow, but it is great against spot removal. Effectively, countering a removal spell while adding a body to the board is pretty darn powerful. It saw play in a few different standard decks, usually in decks highly reliant on one card in particular, like Wynota or Fires of Invention. Those decks could use the plating to protect yourself from discard effects and removal, and you could even add a non-human to the board for Wynota. It's another Amass card that hasn't done anything in a while though. At number 7, it's Sauron the Dark Lord. So far, all the cards we've looked at are from War of the Spark and make zombie armies, but now we're looking at a card that makes an orc army. For 3 generic and 1 of each of the Grixis colors, Sauron is a 7/6 with a very tricky ward to get around. If you target him with something, it gets countered unless you sacrifice a legendary artifact or a legendary creature. So already we're talking about a very resilient creature, and because this is the eponymous Lord of the Rings, you know it has a lot more going on than that. The effect that qualifies him for this list is the fact that anytime an opponent casts a spell, you amass orcs 1. He's also an army payoff because when an army deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you, and when the ring tempts you, you can discard your hand and draw 4 cards. In short, Sauron is hard to kill, delivers a ton of value even if your opponent can kill him, and if left unchecked is pretty close to unbeatable. When it comes to 60 card formats, Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth cards are only legal in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, but despite those limitations, Sauron has quickly found a home for himself in Legacy Reanimator. While he isn't quite as game-breaking as something like Gristlebrand or Atraxa, his ward makes him almost impossible to kill for many Legacy decks, especially in the early game. He's even effectively immune to Edict effects since you'll get an army to sacrifice before it resolves. Sauron looks well positioned to gain some more points in Legacy. At number 6, it's Grim Initiate. For 1 red mana, it's a 1/1 with First Strike, and when it dies, you amass 1. Anytime we see a 1-mana 1/1 that makes a 1/1 when it dies, it tends to see at least a little play in Standard. You're paying so little for a lot. And this even comes with First Strike, meaning it plays well with enhancing effects like counters and equipment. While in Standard, the Initiate was unsurprisingly played in mono-red aggro decks, but it also doesn't have any points since 2020. At number 5, it's Callous Dismissal. For 1 generic and a blue, this sorcery bounces a non-land permanent and amasses 1. Basically, it's an Amass version of Mana War that can even go after non-lands. Bouncing something and adding a body to the board is powerful, and this does it surprisingly efficiently. In Standard, it was played in Nexus of Fate Wilderness Reclamation decks, which looked to make the game go long before using the extra mana for Wilderness Reclamation to cast Nexus of Fate over and over again, at which point the game is over. Bounce spells work nicely in such a deck, as they can buy you more time, and in this case you even get a body to chump block with. It also has a single top 8 from Legacy where it was played in a Threshold deck. Even with multi-format success, the Dismissal hasn't seen play anywhere since 2020. At number 4, it's Lazotep Reaver. For 1 generic and a black, this is a 1/2 that amasses 1 when it enters the battlefield. 2 mana for a 1/2 and a 1/1 is a solid deal. In Standard, it was played in Rakdos aggro decks, as well as the aforementioned Winota deck. It was particularly spicy there because it gave you 2 non-human bodies in the early game, making it more likely that you'd get several triggers when you cast Winota on turn 4. It was also played in mono-black aggro in Historic and Rally the Ancestors zombie decks in Pioneer. Rally decks look to reanimate their graveyard filled with cheap creatures, including Wayward Servants and other zombies, and the Reaver gives you 2 zombie bodies to help you trigger the Servants. Lazotep Reaver doesn't have any points since 2022, though. At number 3, it's Enter the God Eternals. For 2 generic, 2 blue, and a black, this sorcery does a whole bunch of stuff. It does 4 damage to a creature, and gains you life equal to the damage dealt that way. It makes a player mill 4 cards, and it amasses 4. In other words, you pay 5, and you get a 4/4, plus 4 life, a removal spell, and some graveyard action. That's an especially attractive card for control decks, which, between the body, the removal, and the life gain, can really stabilize by casting this spell, so it should come as no surprise that it's been played in control decks in both Standard and Pioneer. At number 2, it's Commence the Endgame. For 4 generic and 2 blue, this is an instant that can't be countered, and it draws you 2 cards, then you amass X, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Commence the Endgame can generate a 3-for-1 between the 2 cards you draw and the army it gives you. It gained most of its points in Standard Wilderness Reclamation decks. Reclamation untaps your lands at your instep, so when it comes to doing instant speed stuff, it effectively doubles your mana, so you could cast Commence way ahead of schedule, which usually made the creature huge. Wilderness Reclamation ultimately got banned out of Standard, and Commence saw play in some blue control decks after that. It's also gained some points in Historic and Pioneer over the years, but so far doesn't have any points in 2024, so it might be done gaining points. And even if it isn't, it's never going to catch the number 1 card on the list, which is Orcish Bowmasters. If you've been playing Magic lately, there's basically no way you didn't expect this. For 1 generic and a black, it's a 1/1 with flash, and whenever it enters the battlefield and whenever an opponent draws a card, except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, the Bowmaster does 1 damage to any target and you amass Orcs 1. So no matter what, the Bowmaster gives you 2 1/1s and it pings something. That's already a pretty nice deal, but what makes the Bowmaster so incredibly powerful is that it also punishes your opponent hard for drawing cards, either growing your army or giving you a new one, while also damaging stuff left and right. Because it's from the Lord of the Rings set, this is another card that's only legal in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, but it's quickly become a staple in all 3, where most decks run some amount of card draw. It is particularly busted when you combine it with symmetrical card draw effects in Vintage, like Time Twister and Wheel of Fortune. The card is so ubiquitous in those formats that there is some real danger of it getting banned or restricted in at least one of them, but it already has so many points that it's likely to remain the number 1 card on this list for the foreseeable future. So those are the top 10 Amass cards in Magic. If you're looking to amass your own army, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card in the video. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to catch up on the over 700 other MTG top 10s, including almost 100 that are on mechanics, you should see the playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.